Welcome to The Road. This is a weekly podcast of All Saints Lutheran Church. I'm your host, John Pedersen, and I serve as pastor. Each week, we reflect on faith, life, and navigating the road ahead. You can find my weekly message here, but this episode is one of many special conversations with people whose lives and experiences have given them insights on things like wellness, family, and living with a unique purpose. I recently sat down with Luke Trouten, who is a manager of donor relations at Urban Ventures in Minneapolis. He talked about how Urban Ventures is supporting children, youth, and families in an important neighborhood of South Minneapolis, and how All Saints has been partnering with Urban Ventures to make an impact. He also talks about the important work that Urban Ventures has been doing over the last year during the pandemic and following the death of George Floyd. If you appreciate this podcast, share it with a friend. Here's the conversation. Well, Luke Trouten, thank you so much for joining me for the podcast, and it's great to have you here. Luke is manager of donor relations for Urban Ventures, and Urban Ventures is an organization that All Saints has been partnering with. Talk to us, Luke, about how you got involved in Urban Ventures.
Yeah, so I was a youth pastor in the suburbs of Minneapolis, and I think we just got a phone call for an event, and they were like, "We need volunteers." They were throwing a big, I think it was a Mexican Independence Day party, and they're just looking for volunteers. And so I said, "Yeah, that sounds fun. I'll bring my students down." And I came down, and we had a good time. I got to learn a little bit more about Urban Ventures and all the programs they had. And I thought, well, we've been looking for a partner for our church to care for our city. You know, all these mission trips and stuff that go abroad and far away. And they're like, "I'd like to also do something here." And so that was 12 years ago. And so for a decade, I would bring students down to volunteer. We would just host our own events down here to talk to students more about our city. And so I did that for the longest time, brought hundreds of my kids through. And when it was time for me to make a career shift, they had a position open. I was like, I love the mission, I love the organization, I love the people. And so it was a pretty easy fit and fun to kind of jump to the other side now as someone who gets to host those groups or talk to those people. So I've been with UV in one form or another for like 15 years. So I've been on staff for like 3. So
got it. Well, great. Yeah. Tell us just a little bit about how Urban Ventures got started.
Yeah, so if you go early 90s, South Minneapolis, Phillips neighborhood, pretty notorious. That's the Murderapolis chapter, real high murder rate. Our street, so we're at Lake and Fourth in South Minneapolis, and that was considered part of Crack Alley. And so it was the part of town you didn't go to. And there was a deep desire among people who had been doing ministry in the area, including our founder, Art Erickson, to reclaim this part of the city. And that started really with literally reclaiming real estate. And so Urban Ventures got its start buying up crack houses for pennies on the dollar, tearing them down and turning crack houses into some sort of community resource. One of our executive vice president is a guy named John Turnipseed, who was at the time heavily involved in the gangs in the area, and he became an ally. He came back and started connecting with us and came to faith and helped to push the gangs out of the area and kind of create a safer place for us to do the ministry that we wanted to do. And so at first it was just, let's buy up cheap real estate and turn it into a community resource. Well, after a while, we realized real estate isn't the solution. It can be a tool, but like just buying up condemned buildings isn't going to help. And so went through and said, well, what does the community need? And that was a period of really taking into account, what are the barriers to getting out of the cycle of poverty? What are the resources that are lacking in the community? And that's where a really wide array of programs came from. Was, oh, the community doesn't have this, let's start that. Oh, the community could use this, we can do that. And so that's why you have an organization that has a soccer program and a farm. Most organizations aren't in both of those things, but the soccer program was a great way to teach mentoring and sportsmanship, to character building. And so early it was buy up real estate, mid was like And then over the last few years, we've said, okay, how can we focus all of these programs we have towards one goal? And we asked around, we looked at research, we spent a lot of time soul searching and figured out there's no silver bullet, but what's the closest thing we can get for helping our community? What's the one thing we could do? And it was education. Every study, every community organization, every professional group's like, the more access to better education, the better people are going to be. And so that's where we came about 5 years ago with our plan of we want to send every kid in our neighborhood to college or another form of post-secondary by 2040. And so that means feeding them well, that means academic support, that means mentoring, that means parenting classes, a lot of the things we were doing, but now focused towards this idea if we can get access to more kids for better education, they're more likely to succeed and change the community. So that's 30 years in 3 minutes.
Awesome. I think you froze for just a moment, but it wasn't enough. I think we got the whole point of everything.
Okay,
so
fair enough.
Thank you. I've seen in your research that 51% of children or youth in your South Minneapolis neighborhood are growing up in poverty. Talk about the impact that makes on the youth that you work with.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about stability and security as being two real keys to the human experience, poverty robs you of both of those. Instability in the form of having to move often, insecurity in the form of not knowing where a next meal is going to come from. And then you get into like if a student needs additional tutoring support, that's really expensive. Usually parents are working multiple jobs, and so you hit summer break, for instance, and well, what do I do with my kids? I can't afford childcare, and so do I give up the income that I can make working so I can stay home with the kids, but then we don't have enough to make ends meet, and it really creates high stress all the time. And on top of that, you look around your community, and when the majority are experiencing poverty, it really leads to a sense of hopelessness. You look around, you're like, no one can escape this. This is just my life, and there can be a lot of mental health issues associated with that, depression or anxiety. There can be a tendency towards unhealthy coping mechanisms, substance abuse, and the like. Or you can find poor life directions become more appealing. A gang can give a sense of belonging. Crime can get me some of those things I don't feel like I can afford. And so when you look through the lens of poverty, a lot of things look differently than how you and I might view it from a more comfortable, more privileged position. And so having the majority of the students have that life experience really it's an uphill battle then to try and talk about things like college education and having a better life when they look around and they're saying, well, I don't see a whole lot of people doing that are from where I'm from. And so that's why one of the ways that it creates a really significant challenge.
Great. This has been an especially challenging year with the pandemic and the death of George Floyd. In fact, as we're recording this today, the closing arguments for that trial are actually happening as we talk. But what have been the greatest challenges for Urban Ventures in the last year?
Yeah, it has been probably the most difficult year for us as an organization. You had the compounding crises of so COVID comes in, and our entire model is built on relationship, meeting with people, getting on campus, running classes, interacting. And so this distance that came just really impacted all of the ways that we do what we do. And so, starting March of last year, we were trying to figure out what's our new method of providing the services that we would want to provide. And then just a few months later, we're just miles from where Floyd was murdered, and we're on Lake Street. And so among the 1,000+ businesses that were destroyed in the civil unrest, that 200 of them are in our core area. They're just right here. And so that was our people in our neighborhood experiencing that violence and that anger, along with just the sense of watching another Black man be killed by a police officer in a way that this community knows all too well can often feel unjust and unaddressed. And so you had both of those at the same time. And that made the last year really tricky. Is we need more than ever to come together, and we need more than ever to stay apart. And so how do we do that as an organization? For COVID, I really have to just say to our staff, you know, they did an incredible job of like, okay, music lessons are online. We had our soccer coaches coming up with athletic drills you could do in a one-room apartment because most of the kids are stuck in home, you know, middle of winter or whatever. And they're like, here's a YouTube video of drills you can do to stay physically active in your house. So they're just, you know, and music lessons and the whole like, one of our liturgy tutors was just rolling up with her blanket and throwing it out in the backyards, and you know, kid will sit at the other side of their screen door and they'll do a tutoring lesson. Like they made it happen, and it was pretty incredible. A horrible circumstance, but man, just the ingenuity and the commitment of our staff was encouraging to see. For Floyd, it was kind of a two-part thing. Because we've been in the neighborhood for about 30 years, we have a lot of connections. We're known. We were able to respond quickly. We were, as far as we know, we were the first organization to offer financial support to the local businesses that were damaged in our area, and they came in the form of immediate grants. We were able to raise over $1 million and give them to businesses, no strings attached, and just say, this is to restock, this is to replace your windows, this is to pay your employees while you have to be closed. Whatever you need it for, it's just for you a gift because we want our economy to reboot. And so it was in the form of grants. And then shortly after that, we went through to all the businesses and said, we want to buy a bunch of gift cards from you. If you don't give gift cards, figure out how to give gift cards, you know, write it on a Post-it note, an IOU, whatever. We're going to buy these from you. And that immediately injected more capital into the local economy. And then we were able to turn around and give those gift cards to our participants who are also struggling and having a difficult time, whether COVID put them out of work or the shop where they usually went had been burned out. And so it was a very quick way to help small business owners and help community members all in one big swoop. And so that was a pretty neat thing. And then we had tons of churches, yours included, who were donating supplies. You know, the Target, the Aldi, the Cub, they were all burned out. All the Mercados suffered some kind of damage. And so people didn't have a way to get basic necessities. And so churches and individuals donated those. We turned our gymnasium into just a big warehouse and had days where people could come and pick up what they needed, you know, food and cleaning supplies and toilet paper, which, you know, was nearly a form of currency last year at one point. And so having those connections to churches throughout the metro area and being able to consolidate those resources into our neighborhood that was when it was in need is really just that kind of funnel picture is a good picture of what we're trying to do, is that there are people who are willing to help. And if we can connect the people who are willing to help to those who are looking for support, then we can really get a lot of change done. So the neighborhood continues to be on edge, like it's tense down here. My commute, I live a mile away from our campus, and my commute involves a lot of National Guard now. And seeing the Humvees again and hearing the helicopters, there's definitely kind of a reminder of the trauma that we experienced last year. And like you said, today's closing arguments, everyone's kind of on edge for what's going to happen. We are grateful that at least this time we have a better idea of how to help even more quickly than we did last time. Hopefully it'll be less needed, but we're definitely in a place of saying we know how to step up for our community. Crisis management isn't usually our thing. We're really about the long-term plan, the long game. But this last year has proven the value of being able to just say, if you're in need, we will help, and we'll figure out the rest kind of after the fact. So,
yeah. Well, like you said, your response last year was incredible, and I know, we brought some supplies and helped in other ways. All Saints started making a greater connection over the last year, and we actually started our connection very minor using City Kid Java Coffee a couple of years ago to support urban
Sure.
ventures. And maybe you could say a few words about that later, but we've expanded our connection now, and some of our congregation are helping tutor kids after school. We raised several $1,000s in the fall to help provide meals for students in the Learning Center during the pandemic. And we're in some conversation now about the possibility of helping with the Summer Venture Scholarship Program. So talk about
Yeah.
the impact Urban Ventures is making today, kind of in part of that long game too that
Yeah.
you're talking about, and what you're excited about in the coming year.
Yeah. Yeah, so we kind of put everything through this frame of what we call our cradle to career pipeline. And so from prenatal classes to college scholarships and kind of everything in between those, of how can we, for every stage of life, come along someone and then they get a career, get married, have kids. Hey, those kids can come to our programming, and we actually have we're seeing now second generations. Actually, last year met a family where we're on our third generation of
Wow,
participating in Urban Ventures programming, and
exciting.
it's fun to see. Mom immigrated, daughter was a part of our program. Her daughter now is a part of our programming. They're one of the local business owners that were helped after the civil unrest. Like, just that kind of longevity is why we love the long game. But when you're playing the long game, it can be easy to kind of lose what's happening in the here and now. And so when you're asking, like, what am I excited about? Last week we awarded over 50 full tuition scholarships for young leaders. It's called the Act 6 program, and it's a scholarship program for specifically for leadership. So students who are demonstrating leadership skills can apply. It's a pretty rigorous process, about 400 applicants each year, and we whittle that down to 50 recipients. And last week we got to celebrate those 50 recipients and bring them in, and families were watching on live stream, and just it's literally a life-changing moment that finances are no longer a barrier to education. And so that's really fun and exciting. And there's a great video they put together of students hearing that had been awarded the recipient, and feels like watching America's Got Talent and you're the big winner or whatever. Like, it was very heartwarming. But that's also for us a good reminder of the culmination of all the things we do. Like, a lot of those students were also those who were in like an after school program. There was a point where they needed someone to provide a warm breakfast, like All Saints provided for our distance learning, a warm breakfast and a safe place to do schoolwork. Like, that is super important. Or the Summer Ventures program that you mentioned. Over the summer, there's a high likelihood of academic slide. Kids forget what they've been learning the last year. That academic slide it often disproportionately affects students of color or students in marginalized communities. And so we have a 7-week program, 4 days a week, where kids can come study math and reading in a fun way, but also have a chance to take classes on like art and science and music and all this kind of stuff. And the double effect of helping keep up those academic gains, sometimes even improve. They'll head into their next grade reading even better than they finished the last. So that academic gain, and then parents answering the question, what do I do with my kid all day when I have to go to work? And we're able to provide a way to do that is just a lot of fun. And so I get excited about those things. I get excited that we're a place where people feel like they can belong, a place where people in the neighborhood will turn when they need help, and an organization that's doing its best to keep its ear to the ground and say, what does the community need, and is there a way for us to respond to that need? Because there are just so many hardworking, dedicated, doing everything they can people living in our neighborhood, and call it societal constructs, call it bad luck, whatever. There's just a lot of barriers that are unfair and unjust. And so being able to watch them jump over those barriers and those hurdles and push through, and anywhere we can doing our best to give a boost or move a barrier or whatever, is just it makes it really easy to go to work in the morning, like knowing that what we're doing is really making a difference. So that's what I'm excited about. Is just the work we're doing here. You never wonder if it's worth it. It definitely is.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I've appreciated about Urban Ventures is just you do some creative, innovative things. I mentioned the City Kid Java Coffee, which
Yeah,
basically a social entrepreneurial enterprise. It's so basically a business creating money for
yeah,
your mission. Talk
yeah.
about City Kid Java.
Yeah, yeah. So it's been rebranded as Urban Ventures Coffee,
Mhm.
and so if you're looking for it, that's what you find now. But yeah, the idea is basically people like coffee, and they will give you money for coffee, and then we can turn that money into life-changing programs. So sure, why not? Yeah, exactly. And so it tastes good, and you're doing good. Is kind of the one of the phrases that we used, and so. It is not unique in our program. Like there are a few other, like we've had a farm stand, and we've had, we've done a few things, but it's definitely the longest lasting. And so some of it is people who are able to purchase coffee just from the website, go buy a pound or a bag or five or whatever, send gift boxes to other people, that kind of thing. And then others like institutional accounts. So like Best Buy serving Urban Ventures coffee in their staff, coffee areas, or being able to get it at the cafe at Bethel University, or these kinds of things. And so every time someone orders Urban Ventures coffee, that money goes directly to fund our programs and what we're doing in the community. And so it's one of the things I love about working here is that obviously we can't do what we do without the support of people who just believe in the mission, but also coming up with ways to maximize that support. So, like I talked about the gift cards, buying gift cards from local businesses, giving those gift cards to participants, you kind of get the best of both worlds. Two birds with one stone is such a kind of macabre phrase, but the idea of you're able to do even more with that opportunity. With the coffee, it's kind of similar. Is not only are we able to sell coffee and make money for our programs, but we have some of our scholarship recipients are interning in the company to learn more about how a small business works, and inventory, marketing, this kind of stuff. And so they're getting a chance to learn marketable skills while working in our effectively our small business that we're running, that is raising funds for the program that helps fund their scholarship. And so it just is a lot of synergy in a way that is just really neat. And I think we stumbled on it a lot. I'd like to pretend that it was wildly strategic, but I think it's mostly just continuing to chase what's the best way to utilize our resources and be good stewards of what we have. And it's that kind of creative thinking that is a lot of fun. Also, just as a side note, it's kind of fun to work at a place that has its own coffee. Like
Yeah.
the break room coffee, always worthwhile, always worth the trip. So I'll often forgo my cup at home just because I'm like, no, the coffee at work is good. So that's nice.
Absolutely. That's great. And just briefly, you've mentioned the farm as well. And I know there are opportunities for folks to come and help out, like in the fall, with some, and maybe other times too. But talk about
Yeah.
the farm and that enterprise. So
Yeah, so we have two farms. We have our urban farm, which is here on our campus in South Minneapolis, and then we have a larger farm in Lakeville, where there's space for farmland, and that has been a long project of ours to again provide nutritious food. We're in what's called a food desert. The access to affordable, nutritious, healthy food is pretty difficult in this area, and so being able to increase that, I mean, studies will show it improves academic performance, it improves stamina and health and all these things that contribute to healthy family dynamics and all that kind of stuff. It's weird how growing carrots can actually lead to a really big change. And so plus it's just kind of fun to have a greenhouse on campus, like in March when it's 30 degrees out, you go in the greenhouse and it's 75 and you're like, yeah, we'll take our meeting here, this is great. And it is a great way for people to come and connect. Obviously, with the pandemic, volunteering has become more difficult. How do you do that safely? But the farm is one of those places where we're able to take groups of people or individuals. And if you're okay with playing in the dirt and getting your hands dirty, then we can probably put you to work and have you help us grow some food. And so it's great for our kids, who you wouldn't think growing up on the south side of Minneapolis that you would get a lot of farming experience, but it's a way that we're able to provide that for our community, and then for volunteers and supporters to just kind of come see what we're doing. It's a fun way to get connected. So
Great. Well, Luke, thank you so much for joining me today, and so grateful for the work you are doing and Urban Ventures is doing in South Minneapolis, and so grateful for our partnership. So blessings to you.
thank you so much. If we had more churches like All Saints, we'd be doing even more great work. It's fun to have partners like you who are leaning into what we're doing down here. So we're grateful and encouraged when churches like yours step in to help us make a difference. It's really great. So glad to be here.
That's this week's conversation. You don't have to navigate the road ahead alone. You can join with others at All Saints. Visit allsaintsmtka.org for more information. Join us next time.